oldest practitioners of global organization. William Lever, a grocer's son from Bolton, England, pioneered the mass marketing of packaged goods and the concept of the transnational corporation. From the 1890s to the 1920s, he roamed the world, setting up subsidiaries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, giving capital and goals to local managers, and then sailing off, returning years later to check on progress. He searched to find the right locations and the best people. He gave his managers clear objectives and then allowed them the room to deliver. So simple. Thus was born a business empire, which today has revenues of £29 billion and 260,000 employees in 100 countries. Lever authored a conundrum that has faced successive generations of our managers. How to preserve the benefits of the independent local unit's intimate contact with local conditions, while extracting the advantages of interdependence from the total corporate entity's scale and scope. Stated differently, yet still paradoxically, our aim is a large corporate body with many hundred small company souls. That is the way to compete optimally in international markets, simultaneously to have the attributes of a small company, simplicity, speed, flexibility, clarity, and the benefits that arise from size and international spread. Striking the right balance between these two goals has been a long, and always unfinished, learning experience at Unilever. Although our organization has gone through several mutations in 7 decades, it has been our unshakable philosophy that the only way to understand consumer needs and how they might be satisfied is with strong local management teams. At Unilever's 300 operating companies, managers are 90 to 95% local, with a sprinkling of expatriates. These expats are not, as is typical with international companies, from a single nation. They come from the world over. An Indian leads Cheeseboro Ponds in the United States. Our top man in Brazil is Italian. A Belgian leads the business in China, and our chairman in Arabia is American. Local managers are critical to achieving intimacy with consumers country by country, because, while there are global companies, there is no uniform global consumer, nor will there ever be, though some may seek to convince you otherwise. Companies that believe only in global brands and homogeneous global markets are likely to get into difficulty. The relatively small number of global brands, McDonald's, Coke, Nike, and a handful of others, should be a warning. Diversity of tastes and individualism are on the rise around the globe, reflecting subtle but enduring differences in local customs and culture. Accordingly, global companies these days must, more than ever, be responsive to local conditions. There is no better testament to the intensity with which Unilever pursues globalization than the international distribution of our research effort, which employs about 9,000 people. There are major centers for basic research in the United Kingdom and Holland, and this is natural in light of Unilever's dual nationality and unique dual CEO structure. Yet there are, in addition, major company research facilities in the United States, India, and, latterly, China. We have no fewer than 70 innovation centers operating in 20 countries, each one dedicated to product development on a regional basis. No company in the world has such roots in as many local soils. Until the mid-1960s, the national management of every country where Unilever operated was fully responsible for all operations in that country. There were advisory product groups at the corporate center, but the local manager had the final word on how products were marketed and distributed. Our management has always been acutely aware of the arguments against a greater role for the center, which can be summarized as follows. Operating managers know their business better than the center. The center may tend to cushion individual businesses so that in time they become risk-averse. The center's managers waste time and effort seeking mythical synergies between divisions. Technology and outsourcing render many of the center's support functions unnecessary. As the pace of change increases everywhere, central planning and control become even more ineffectual and are often a hindrance to speed and flexibility at the divisional level. The mythical beast. While these points all had merit in a simpler time when markets were less globalized and competition less intense, The advantages of 100% decentralized autonomy have lately weakened. Corporate centers now have greater scope for adding value, thanks to the extraordinary advances of information technology, IT, and communications, the ease of travel, and the integration of national economies into regional groupings like the European Union and NAFTA. These trends require a corporate center that engages in creative dialogue with the autonomous business units and stimulates them to cross traditional business boundaries, expand their conceptions of markets, share ideas and insights, and make new lateral connections. A corporate center can challenge, probe, and demand stretch. The centerless corporation is, or should be, a mythical beast. Political scientists have long observed that centralized power can lead to bureaucratic procedures that ultimately stifle innovation. Accordingly, our corporate center sets out to be a catalyst, an enabler, providing tools and knowledge that influence local behaviors. The center should be lean, but activist. It must have strong people with a light touch, and combine central direction with the stimulation of maximum operating freedoms. It must be self-disciplined, seldom compromising the autonomy of business units, but intervening decisively if they move off plan, outside the strategic framework, or away from our business principles. Unilever's multi-local multinationalism contains competing forces and occasionally contradictions. Generations of our managers have self-critically examined how we should be optimally organized so that the separate operating companies and the corporate center contribute maximum value to each other and to the business as a whole. In the mid-1990s, after much soul-searching about our performance, we opted for a radically fresh approach. A series of portfolio changes that reduced product diversification and made our business simpler and more coherent. In addition, we created a more focused organizational structure, better able to execute strategy on a global scale and, hence, better able to cope with change and intensifying competition. With this realignment, we achieved a much clearer distinction between corporate strategic leadership, call it portfolio management if you will, and operational execution. The bedrock of local independent businesses, plugged into their unique environments, remained unaltered, but their lateral interconnectedness or interdependence and their links to the center were strengthened. No company can achieve significant global scale without an activist corporate center. Our 12 business groups develop regional strategies consistent with and extending the overall corporate strategy. The 12 groups retain full responsibility for the growth and profitability of their regions. Aside from common-sense aspects of unity such as common accounts, information systems, statutory functions, and shared services like bulk purchasing for business units, the key responsibility at the center is knowledge acquisition, sharing, and dissemination, from which we obtain the leverage implicit in our scale and scope. A case in point. Several years ago, we took what was then seen as a highly controversial decision. We moved to open information systems, and in a matter of months, had over 60,000 PCs networked around the company. We did not spend time discussing the commercial justification. The center recognized that linkage and interactivity were just the technological facilitation that had been lacking. Hitherto, if the manager of a soap factory in Durban had a problem at 5 o'clock one evening, the best he could do would be to call the center and ask for advice. If his contacts at the center didn't have a solution to recommend, the problem might persist for months while information and advice filtered upward and then downward through the company. By contrast, today that manager logs onto the Unilever soap network, inputs his problem, and the next morning there will be comments and suggestions from soap factory managers in Bombay, Jakarta, Liverpool, or Sao Paulo. Sounds eminently sensible, but it couldn't happen without a network and a culture of trust rather than command and control. The company's human chain of understanding and interactivity is of immense importance. On paper, Unilever's organization does not convey a great deal of information about how our business really works, which is often through a series of informal networks. Unilever people travel relentlessly and are transferred frequently. Most people in top management, myself included, have worked in a half-dozen locations in the company. The result is that we are couriers of knowledge. While the role of the center is, in a sense, to be the gatherer and storehouse of knowledge, actual dissemination gets done mostly by managers moving from job to job, and by formal and informal networks. We also encourage our people to visit each other in all corners of the world, often without approval of the center and with disregard for hierarchical niceties. Knowledge management in the global colossus. In recent years, we have put greater emphasis on trying to achieve more effective utilization of our single unique asset, our knowledge. Most large organizations probably manage to use only between 10 to 20% of the knowledge embedded in the company and its people. We're anxious to find ways to crank that number up to 50, 60, 70%, and beyond, as a source of huge competitive advantage. Although this may sound arrogant, it remains true that we have more knowledge of consumers and of practices that work in very diverse areas worldwide than do our competitors, or for that matter, the typical global enterprise. The question is how to access this knowledge within the operating units and make it visible and available to everyone in Unilever, as we must if we are to meet our growth goals. There is no aspect of our technical or business processes where Unilever does not have an exemplary best practice somewhere. The trick is to cull this vast reservoir of knowledge and to ensure that it is applied everywhere. The challenge is exciting, the payoff extraordinary. Knowledge sharing has been stimulated by the recent creation of core teams for each of our 12 product categories. Core teams are charged with finding fresh ways to leverage international scale and scope. They ensure that our R&D and our big international brands, like Dove and Lipton, are managed from a global as well as a local perspective. Category core team members come from operations all over the world. Their goal is to blend and balance regional and global needs in the drive for sustained and winning innovation. They also play a key role in brand equity management, increasingly important as we cull peripheral brands and focus resources behind a much smaller stable of power brands. Core teams are opportunity hunters. They spur the rapid global adoption of new products and processes that have met with great success in one region. In addition, they are catalysts of best practice adoption. One best practice currently being spread around the world is a program called Total Productive Maintenance, or TPM, originally a Japanese concept. Under TPM, operators take personal responsibility for production line efficiency and quality. The results have been startling. Soap production costs halved in Indonesia, rated capacity doubled in India, highly acclaimed and award-winning team practices in our British food factories. Here is another concrete example of the leverage obtainable from knowledge sharing. After many decades of struggle and lackluster results, Hindustan Lever has been transformed into an outstanding growth engine. It has doubled in size and profitability every 4 years and acquired a market value on the Bombay Stock Exchange of over $10 billion. It is acknowledged as one of the best-managed companies in Asia. Our managers there do not think of themselves as working for a subsidiary of a multinational, but as a powerful Indian company that feeds off a global network. Over a decade ago, Hindustan Lever made a mistake. It failed to recognize an unsatisfied demand for affordable detergent products, and instead concentrated on the high-end middle-class market. Then a local company invaded the market with a low-cost alternative that earned instant success. Hindustan Lever promptly rethought the product, the price point, the marketing strategy, and the whole distribution system, and then introduced its own low-cost brand, Wheel, which won back market share and now outsells the high-end product. Hindustan Lever responded with speed and total determination to develop a complex new business system. This is not only an Indian story. The eye-opening experience rippled throughout Unilever, upward and outward, and initiated a very different approach to meeting the needs of some of the poorest consumers, who constitute half the world's population and earn less than $200 a month. New products for this market segment have been launched in Brazil and in Africa. They are expected to move ahead rapidly.